So, when most people think about therapy, they picture talk therapy, or, of course, the age old of thinking that someone's laying on a couch while someone else is taking deep notes about them. But healing is so much more layered than that, and we've learned a lot more about this. It can be somatic, it can be spiritual, relational, and even creative. And when we open ourselves to the diversity of therapeutic modalities, we unlock new ways of seeing ourselves, our relationships, and our communities, which can become so important, especially for communities that have had a really hard time with talk therapy. And they needed to process emotional challenges and their life and whatever may be going on with them in other ways that may not be normal for their culture. My guest today, Melissa Dumaz, is a licensed marriage and family therapist, holistic wellness expert, and a best-selling author with over 20 years of experience helping ambitious women heal, grow, and thrive. She's the founder of Holistic Healing with Mel, where she guides individuals, corporations, and communities through practices that nurture mind, body, and spirit, whether it's journaling, sound therapy, EMDR, Reiki, or retreats that create space for transformation. Melissa also co-hosts the Hats podcast, where she explores how we juggle life's many roles with authenticity and grace. Her book, The Love Challenge 30 Days, 30 Ways to Increase the Love in Your Relationship, has inspired countless readers to bring more intention into love and connection. In today's conversation, we'll explore why experiencing therapy across different modalities matters, why EMDR is such a powerful tool for trauma healing, and how holistic approaches to wellness ripple outward, transforming not just individuals, but our relationships and the way that we connect as humans. Welcome to Reframing Perspectives, the podcast where we challenge traditional thinking and explore the power of empathy in conscious leadership, personal growth, and human connection. I'm Dr. Payal Beri, and in each episode, we dive into thought-provoking conversations that expand perspectives and spark transformation. Because empathy reframes perspectives. Let's begin. Melissa, thank you so much for joining. I have been following your content, and of course, we've met in person, and a lot of the work that you do is so intentional, obviously as a therapist yourself, but you've now broadened yourself up to really take more people down this journey of understanding what healing looks like, and what healing looks like not just from your traditional talk therapy perspective. And I think that that is so important in today's time. I know as a former clinical therapist, when I first got my degree, I was just so up, about talk therapy, and that's the way to go. And that's the only thing you can do. And this was 15 years ago. But I think everyone kind of goes through that initially when they first get licensed and everything. But then as you just grow with age and experience, you recognize that different groups, different communities, different people respond differently to healing. And I'm so excited to dive into all of that with you today.
Thank you. I absolutely love the way that you beautifully wrap that. I don't know if I could have said that myself. So thank you. You even helped me to see oh yeah, I am doing that, huh? That's the language for it, because it's one thing to feel it and to experience, but to be able to put language surrounding it, you nailed it. So thank you for that.
Of course. And as always, people want to know more about what got you into therapy, into being a healer, and what was your journey into recognizing that there are more than one way to heal besides the traditional path that we consider and think about?
Yeah, I love this question. My first thought is the journey that I had in undergrad, which I'll talk about a little bit. But the deeper I dive into that question, I realize I come from a family of givers, a family of space holders, a family of healers. And rather that my grandmother working in the daycare, my mom working as a nurse, or family members working as teachers, we're all in this space where we are giving, teaching, sharing, healing in our own ways. So I definitely think that is just woven into my cloth. The other thing too is that I actually started out undergrad as a pre-med major. I wanted to go to grad school. I wanted to go to medical school and to be a pediatrician. And it was my sophomore year that I got my butt kicked with all the science classes, especially OChem and OChem lab. And I was like, oh my goodness. And as a freshman carrying 20 credits, thinking that I could do it, because I thought, well, I was such a good student in high school, I could do this, but it was a whole new ball game. But sophomore year, I took psychology 1-on-one and absolutely fell in love. And our professor had a therapist come out and speak to us about her field. And at that time, it was called MFCC, Marriage, Family, Child Counseling, which is now MFT, Marriage, Family Therapist, or LMFT, Licensed Marriage, Family Therapist. And so I connected with her afterwards, had lunch with her, and just asked her questions about her work and how she got into it. And then I started doing research. If I change my major to psychology, what would that look like? What can I do? I immediately learned that if I did, I had to go to grad school, which I was open to. From there, I called my mom and I said, I'm changing my major. And she was like, okay, that's fine. But her first question was, can I still call you doctor? And I said, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but I'm definitely going to go as far to get licensed as a therapist. But I don't know if I will work to be like a psychologist or a psychiatrist or like what the doctor part would look like. So that is how I got into the field. But once I changed to psychology, my whole world opened up and it went from like having to go to school to like being excited about school again. And I did so much better in my years of grad school than I did in undergrad. Because as you know, undergrad, it's like you're taking your generals plus your major. But in grad school, it is specifically concentrated to what you want to do. And it was the most amazing experience. And I thrived. And it was my own professor and clinical director that said, if you're working to become a therapist, you should also go get your own therapy. And before any of us could be like, well, he said, even if you don't think you need therapy, at least go so that you know what it's like to be a client, so that you have that level of empathy, what it's like to sit on the other side of the couch and to be that vulnerable and to open up. And I said, okay, because in my mind, I'm like, I want to be the best therapist for my client. And when I went, lo and behold, I was like, oh, I need to be here. It wasn't until that moment that I realized there was so much stuff in my own childhood and my own upbringing that I needed to unpack. And it wasn't things that were new for me or that I wasn't aware of, but it was the impact that those things were having on my life. Because it's easy to assume that you're functioning, you're fine, you're working, you're going to school, you're in a assuming healthy relationship that you're fine. But it's not until you start to peel back those layers that you really realize that it's been really helpful to have another perspective on these things that are happening in my life, these things that have happened, and these things that are coming up for me to help me make choices that I feel most comfortable with. So that has been like how my journey began as a therapist and a client.
Wow, it reminds me of I was listening to another podcast recently, Emma Grades, and she had a psychologist on, and Emma asked her that, do you think everybody needs to go to therapy? And of course, the answer was everyone can benefit from going to therapy, but it's also a distinguish of people may be living and surviving, but do you want to be thriving? And there is that difference where, yeah, of course, you can get through life and get married and like make careers and have purpose and all of those things without ever having stepped into therapy. But you also could be thriving in your relationships and you could feel a different sense of self of who you are. I know that one of the challenges, though, that a lot of times people feel about therapy is that when they go into it, or there's this fear about that I'm going to change. And because I'm going to change, then those relationships are going to change. And I don't know if I'm ready to necessarily take the risk of those relationships no longer being a part of my life or changing the way that I interact in those relationships also. And that is such a big part of what prevents people from, they may go to therapy one time, but they won't continue.
Right, right, absolutely. And I'm of the mindset that we don't really know what we don't have access to until we go to therapy and we start peeling back those layers. Because you're right, people make that assumption that, like, I'm good, I like my circle, I like my relationship, I don't want that to change. But what if your good can go from good to great? What if you can go from just like living, as you said, to thriving? And what if you could have more access to all of the good that's happening in your life once you start to unpack some of the areas that are blockages or some of the areas that are concern or even some of those areas that are considered trauma?
It's so true, but there's also this idea, and I see this all the time, even in my I will say, in the South Asian community, and I see this with family members that have this perception, even though I myself am a former therapist and I can tell them about the field. Of course, they're not going to listen to me, but there's this notion that, oh, if I go, it's going to be now part of my medical records. And then it's going to be, how is it going to be used against me? Or not recognizing the confidentiality clause, like not recognizing that, no, your employers do not get access to this. There's no access. They don't even have to know that you're going to therapy. Like there's none of those elements that are involved with it. But there's still this hesitation of and paranoia about what is this therapist, or that I must be crazy in order to go, that there is something mentally off with me in order to go. Some of those very archaic way of looking and thinking. How do you position it for those individuals that just have these deep resistance because of that cultural stigmas that they're just living in?
Right. I think one of the things, of course, is education, that psychoeducation. Like you said, the confidentiality piece, that's not something that everyone knows. Even when it comes to when I share with clients like what the confidentiality clause is and I give them a test, I'm like, God forbid you came in here and you told me that you committed a crime. Like, can I report that? And they're like, yeah, you. I'm like, no, you committed the crime, not that you're going out and you're going to go do the thing. And they're like shocked. I'm like, again, these are the things that are reportable and these are the things that are not. And so having that education on that part, I think is really important. And then I think also for people that look like you, people that look like me, they feel comfortable having a therapist that looks like them. You know, that there sometimes is that automatic trust factor, like, oh, I have someone that looks like me. Because the reality, too, is we're talking about trauma, is we're weaving trauma into our conversation. There's also that generational trauma of mistrust, which is keeping some of us from going to see a therapist, just like it keeps some of us from going to see a medical doctor and getting those medical services that we may need, is because there is that generational mistrust. And so it's important for us to continue to provide that education, to share that knowledge. And I think social media in some ways can help, or has helped with that. Like more people are being open to have those conversations about going to therapy or having a therapist. And I've even had clients come to me and say that, like, oh, I've done coaching for years. Now I'm in a season in my life or in a place in my career where I'm crazy not to have a therapist because business is so busy, or life is so busy, or if you will, the world is so crazy, that we all need a safe space where we can just be heard and seen and have an opportunity to unpack. And another way that we could reframe going to therapy is it's a tool. It's a tool that we have in our toolbox. Therapy is a place where you can garner a lot of tools on how to manage things that are happening internally and things that are happening outside. But also therapy can be looked at as a tool. Like, you know what? I don't really know how to express myself. Oh, I have this tool though. I have a therapist, or I have a safe space. Oh, you know what? I don't know what to do with these tears that keep flowing. I don't have the words for them. Oh, but I have this tool. I have therapy. I have this safe space. And so even if people could see it as, I'm coming against some challenges. And with these challenges, I need a new tool. I need to fix the plumbing in my household. Instead of calling a plumber, maybe I need to go to Home Depot and to get a wrench, or to get a screwdriver, or to get a hammer. Your therapist can be a tool in your toolbox just as well.
Yeah, I think that is so important to reframe it as a tool, because a lot of times there's this idea that we're bringing this other random person into our lives, and who are they to say, what we can do? And it's the same idea as if your kitchen has your sink breaks, then you're going to call a plumber, you're going to call a mechanic for your car, you're going to call an endocrinologist for your doctor appointments, whatever it is. Similarly, a therapist is there because of whatever may be going on in those relationships, or for yourself, and how you are outgrowing certain things but don't have language to put to it. And when you just have language, it's the same idea where, I have some autoimmune issues, and when I get the name of this is what's going on with you, it's such a relief. It's such a massive relief, because now, not a relief that I have it, but a relief that I know how to now define it and what I can think about it. And it's similar with that. But I get really sad, and it's genuinely really sad, when I see people in my life who are stuck in not so great relationships and not so great situations. And they wait to go to therapy until it's gotten so bad that it's really hard to recover from it. And then the blame is that the therapist is going to tell us to break up anyways or divorce anyways. They're actually going to point us in that direction. Or it's this idea that if we go to therapy, that means that we're weak. And so there is this tool that is so powerful and they just refuse to access it. And sometimes I wonder if there is some self-sabotaging behavior in there by refusing to go and use this powerful tool of therapy to fix the marriage or fix the relationship. And it's ultimately their subconscious way of, I don't even want to fix, I want to find a way to actually break this up.
Right, right, absolutely. And not realizing that therapy can be that place where that happens naturally through the healing process or through the process of processing. When I see couples, I tell them one risk that you take by going to therapy as a couple is that through your journey, you could realize this is not who you want to be with. And that doesn't mean that it's a fail or that therapy didn't work. That means that therapy got you to a place to truly see what it was and what it was not. And so even though some people may feel like I don't want to repair it, therapy doesn't have to be about repairing. Therapy could also be about having a safe space to say, I don't want to do this anymore. Having
Yeah.
someone to interpret that communication for you, having a space to be able to, someone to intervene when you've been trying to say that to your partner, but you get cut off, or you get yelled at, or you get scared, or you get nervous. And now you have a safe space, someone who's going to help to advocate and mediate for this space to continue to be safe for both of you to really share the desires of your heart. And this could be the space where you do get to say, like, I want a divorce, where you get to speak out loud those quiet moments that you're having when no one else is around, those moments that are only known by you when you go to lay your head on your pillow. And in therapy, there's a tool that I teach my clients called Name It to Tame It. And so you talked about that a little bit, Pyle, when you said going to the doctor and getting a name for your autoimmune challenges or your autoimmune diagnosis and having the language for it. And so when we can put a name on it, that does give us the opportunity to be able to tame it. Just the same as when we walk into a room, whether it's a networking event or a classroom or a new social event, and we see people that we haven't met yet. We may think like, who are these people? Or there's a little bit of nervousness or a little social anxiety. But when you get introduced, oh, Pal, I want you to meet Melissa, or oh, Melissa, I want you to meet Pal, then like maybe that nervousness or that anxiety starts to subside because now there's a name to who you are, and I can name the people in the room. That is the case with our medical concerns, with our mental health concerns, and therapy can be that place where we start to put a name on the things that are happening to us in our lives and the things that are happening to us internally, mentally, emotionally, so that we can get a better understanding about that.
There's so much to that. And it reminds me of this moment where I had just transitioned from being a clinical therapist working in a nonprofit, and I moved into corporate. And it was my first corporate job. And I didn't know anything about corporate language or any of that. And I was on the learning and leadership development team, and we were facilitating an 8-month high potential program filled with senior directors and directors. And here I am in my early 30s at this point, and my job was to make sure that all the participants who are in the program, who are 30 years older than me or 25 years older than me, are feeling seen and are connected and that the program is going smoothly. So part of it was halfway into the program, I was having calls with everyone to make sure that the program is going well. One of the facilitations was a Myers-Briggs facilitation assessment, and the facilitator happened to mention that one of the styles is one of the worst leadership styles. And there was one person in that room who had that style and was really upset. So when I got on the call with this person who is definitely 25, 30 years older than me, they were quivering on the phone. You could tell they were about to start crying or they were trying to hold back. And very stern, very emotional about how they felt attacked and how they felt embarrassed. And I listened. I used my therapeutic tools to just apply it at this moment. I listened, and because I validated his experience and reset what he could do, then we provided him with another assessment, debrief, all the things. So fast forward now, at the end of it, we have a graduation for them. They're allowed to bring their significant other, whoever it is. I'm walking down the hall. He stops me, introduces me to his wife, and says, Pyle, I want you to meet my wife. And he tells his wife that if Pyle hadn't just sat there and listened to me, validated me, reframed how she was seeing what I was going through, and I knew that she had been a therapist in the past, I wouldn't have agreed to go to therapy with my wife, and we would probably be getting a divorce right now.
Wow. That's
It
so powerful.
it was so powerful, and that story has always stayed with me because it just shows that the tools that we learn in therapy, the naming it, the language, they can ultimately end up helping you in every kind of situation outside of it. It's not just about the marriage, but it's about the fact that because of, yes, I'm a therapist, but as a therapist, I we teach those skills. So now you have the same skills that we have, and you're able to exercise those. So by having those skills and teaching them to someone, you're now able to reshape these relationships that you had given up on at one point.
Right, absolutely. And then the ripple effect from that, because like now that his marriage and relationship is better, that's definitely going to impact his leadership skills and whoever he's in relationship with, that he's in business with, or that's working for him or on his team. And so it just creates this ripple effect. It's not just us that's changed as the client, but it's everyone that is connected with us, even strangers, to be able to interact with other people out in the world. Like our healing isn't, yes, it's for us when we enter into that therapeutic relationship, but the impact that it has on everyone else around us and the rest of the world is just like beyond powerful.
Yeah, I always say that whatever challenges that we're going on internally, they may be manifesting differently at home versus at work, but they're all rooted in the same challenges. So if you're having challenges at home, that is going to show up at work. You're not this there's no light switch that you turn on and off, and no matter how much they wanted us to believe that in a previous time of work culture is that you leave your personal stuff at home and walk in the door, but there really is no switch to that. And if anything, when you're suppressing that, it creates more tension, more anger, more fear, and that creates those toxic workplaces. I want to dive in with you about when we talk about therapy, and this is something that you've just done so beautifully, is to help people recognize that talk therapy isn't the only modality. And there are people, and I see this, that especially men, right? They struggle with this a lot. But there's this idea of, oh, I have to go sit there and talk about all of this stuff. And some people are still so resistant to speaking up, or maybe they're just not great at articulating themselves well. And so they're not able to communicate in the way that, someone else can. And so talk therapy isn't always the only way. And so I'd love to hear from you about all the different modalities that are available for those who think that talk therapy is the only one.
Yeah, there are so many different modalities, and I feel like the more creative, the more outside of the box that a therapist could think or to be, we can really structure a session so that it's not predominantly talk. Like there's art therapy where you're doing different mediums or different forms of art. There's run therapy, there's walk therapy, there's play therapy. There's also a therapist that I know who does nature therapy. So she does nature and there is some talk to it, but it's out in nature because we all grow differently. We all heal differently. Like, even though there are some patterns in human behavior that are the same, our stories are unique. And the way that we arrive to our place of healing or the way that we arrive to our place that we consider to be thriving, we get there differently. And the reality, too, which is, I think, another reason that some people may not go to therapy or take their time doing it, is that you do have to find the right fit. It's a relationship. And so just like any other relationship, it is about finding the right fit. Like I've heard some therapists say, like, I don't want a therapist that's just going to sit and nod. Like I want feedback. I want to know, like, am I on the right track, or how does that sound? Or do you have any tips for me or any tools for me? And naturally, the client may not have all the language to know, like, this is the type of therapist that I'm looking for. But that is the value of doing a consultation with a potential therapist you may be interested in, and also researching or exploring what are my other options that are available to me besides talk therapy, and finding out what those options are, because there are a variety of ways to be able to heal. And it's important to do it in a way that resonates with you, but also in a way that is going to stretch you and also encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone in some ways as well.
That's so true. I think about times where, like, for example, with kids, a young toddler doesn't know how to articulate their thoughts. So you have play therapy with them. You have Legos, you have a Play-Doh, you have clay, other things that can help them express themselves, drawings and paintings, whatever it may be. But similarly, adults can have that same challenge. And going for a walk and getting out of the same office space. So you're, instead of going from your work or your home office into a therapist's office, it's meeting them for a walk and speaking around there, or sitting on the sand, or going in the woods, whatever it may be, a hiking and talking, or it could be somatic. And that's the other piece that actually I found so fascinating and so interesting and relatively new: EMDR. I think EMDR is so revolutionary. One of the things that I do want to touch on about EMDR versus talk therapy and somatic and all these other types of practices, though, is that there still isn't a such thing as instant gratification of, oh, I'm healed. And I think that there is a lot of this misinformation that is out there around rapid eye movement and you're healed in 3 sessions, or you're healed in 1 minute. You don't even need, there's some people who are coaches out there, or meditative coaches and manifestation coaches, where it makes me cringe sometimes because they talk so much about how you don't need therapy when you can resolve your healing in 1 session of this, like, rapid eye movement thing. And I think that that can be very misleading. And I'm just so curious, one, if you could explain and define what EMDR is, and second, about those modalities that, yes, they do actually help release some core beliefs faster, but there's still a process with it.
Right, absolutely. I'll try to go in the order in which you asked. So EMDR, it stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And that's a long word, so which is why we call it EMDR for short. And traditionally, EMDR was researched and decided upon that it would be helpful for veterans returning from war. And so that is who the clients were who were receiving EMDR, to help them to reprocess this trauma that they had experienced. And then further research, they realized, like, oh, this doesn't work just with war vets. It works with anyone who's experienced any type of trauma. And then further research, they realized, like, oh, it even works with themes in life. Like if there's a theme of I'm not good enough, a theme of no one will ever love me, if those themes are popping up in your life, then it also helps to work with that. And so I don't believe that we are ever healed. I think that we are healing, because each part of us that gets healed, it unlocks like another layer for us. And that layer may be like, now I have better confidence. And so now that you have better confidence, that confidence may be leading you to, now I need to be able to communicate my boundaries now that I have the confidence to do it. And now that I want to communicate those boundaries, what's the language that I use? How can I practice it so that I sound assertive and heard, and not aggressive or not passive when I do that? And therapy can be that safe place to be able to practice those new tools. But EMDR takes whatever the target is, whether it's a life theme or a traumatic event, and it focuses on that specific target by using bilateral stimulation. And that bilateral stimulation can be done through eye movement, rapid eye movement, left and right, or it could be done through tapping the left and the right side at the same time. And so you are provided that space and that timing with a therapist who's trained in EMDR and or certified in EMDR, and they walk you through focused on a specific target, and then we take that target and we include the bilateral stimulation. So bilateral stimulation is the only place where we are igniting the left and the right brain at the same time. There are other things that do it, which is why you hear people say, I feel better after I dance. I feel better after I take a run. I feel better after I walk, because it's that left and right side of our body that's moving at the same time. But where EMDR differs from just a walk or a run is that we're focused on a very specific target while we're doing it. And so through that, we take whatever that target is and it sends a message to the brain that says, hey, Pyle, this is old information, but your body is responding today as if it just happened today. Let's take this information, let's process it, and send the signal to your brain and to your body that this is old and it deserves to be in long-term memory. And so once that target is processed and pushed into long-term memory, now when we think about it or when we remember it or when we, if you will, triggered by it, the body says, oh, I remember it, but I feel very neutral. I don't have any strong feelings. I don't have any weak feelings or thoughts about it. It just feels very neutral, which is the goal of EMDR. It's not to erase the memory. We can't erase the memory. The goal is so that when this memory comes up, or if you're triggered, if you will, that it is neutralized, that the body isn't saying, this is happening today. I need to protect you. I need to get you out of this situation. It's not igniting your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn nervous system response. Our nervous system is created to be able to protect us. And so it's doing its job, but sometimes it's reacting from old information. And so EMDR helps us to take that old information and put it into long-term memory so that we can make room to respond for what is current information. And so that is the summary version, if you will, of EMDR. It's like
Yeah.
taking a file and saying, this is filed in the wrong place. Let's put it into the right file so that we know where to find it when and if we need it, or maybe we won't ever need it and it's filed away.
And I think what's so powerful about it is that what people sometimes might not realize, maybe it's conscious, maybe it's not, but because of our amygdala, where it stores all of our memories around everything, then if something happened on a specific date and it was really hard, every year that date, you may feel symptoms of that thing coming up. You may not consciously remember that, oh, this happened on this day and that's why I'm feeling this way. You might actually have completely forgotten what happened on that day, but your body remembers, and you may suddenly be irritable for no reason. You may be annoyed. You may suddenly start getting emotional and crying. Maybe your stomach hurts. You're having physical symptoms. And it's all of those emotional things. And if you start to notice the pattern that, wow, every year on these days or during this month, I always tend to feel this way. And when you can associate it and link it back to recognizing that, oh, this has to do with the fact that this event happened and my body has remembered, that EMDR allows you to like desensitize that. And so that when that date comes back again, you're unbothered. You're able to move through the day without reliving that experience.
Yes, yes. And I love that word unbothered. Like I usually use neutral, but it's so true. You could be like, "Oh, that happened and I'm completely unbothered."
That has been
And
my word for the month. It has been like, I am going to be unbothered with this. Even if I'm not there yet,
unbothered.
I'm using the word unbothered.
I love it. I may put that in my marketing. EMDR will help you be unbothered about the things that are
Unbothered.
bothering you now. Let's get unbothered together.
Absolutely. So now let's talk about that second part of that question, which is that instant gratification that people want of feeling better, or that the anxiety that comes up of like, why have I not been healed? So many times people will go to therapy and they're like, it didn't work. And it's like they did a session or maybe 3 sessions and they immediately blame the therapist for it not working.
Right, absolutely. I call it, the microwave age. Like, we want to be able to put it in the microwave and have a gourmet meal. And the reality is that any gourmet meal that you've had, it did not come from the microwave. And so we have to remember that you can have it quick, but it's not going to be thorough. It's not going to be as delicious. It's not going to be as wholesome. It may not even last as long. And you're going to find yourself right back into these cycles that maybe led you to having to seek therapy in the first place. And I also understand. I know it hurts. I know you're in pain and I know you want comfort. And so, this desire for that pain to be alleviated fast, I get it. Like, none of us want to be in pain. And even like if we're in pain and we're in this place of like physical pain, if you will, and we're in this place of like outside of our zone of tolerance, what Tylenol do you have? What bear do you have? Like, what do you have that I can take to get myself out of pain? But mental health differs in the medical world in that regard. Like, the only way out, if you will, is through. And so sometimes people, they don't want to go through it to be able to get to the other side. But there's also the reality that whatever happened to you that has you bothered, it did not happen overnight. And the symptoms that you've been experiencing, they did not come overnight and they have been sitting with you for a while. And so we have to peel that thing back like an onion, is what I call it. And if you've ever cooked with an onion or if you've ever seen the layers and the peels of it, there are peels that you have to get through to be able to get to the part that you're going to use in your gourmet meal. And the reality, too, is as you're peeling, as you're chopping that onion, there will be some moments that it's going to make you cry. And the beauty, though, is that what you get in that process is something that a microwave could never give you. It is the courage, it is the self esteem, it is the ability to be able to communicate yourself when you're on the other side that you weren't able to do it before. And so while we want to microwave ourselves through healing, there are some really beautiful gifts that we're missing out by not taking the journey, by not taking the scenic route.
I love that analogy, not just because I'm a foodie, but because that is genuinely so perfect that, yes, we are in a generation of wanting a gourmet meal coming out of a microwave and expecting it to taste just as delicious and cared for. What happens when you have a gourmet meal is like that person, that chef is putting care into it. They are nurturing it. They have spoken to the plants and the herbs that are going to feed you. And when you do a microwave, it's a start here, 30-second, give it to me. It's like your bread has gone limp. It's just, there's nothing there.
Yes.
And you're expecting this. And it's so true. There's this instant need for this. And how much of that do you think it has to do with also just not able to hold the emotion that is going to require to get through that moment? And like you said, that it is that pain that you have to go through, the tears, the onion example, but being able to have that patience with yourself. What can someone do that is approaching it relatively new, or they're approaching it but nobody else in their family knows about it because their family still holds on to that stigma around therapy? How do they process this, experience this, if yes, they experienced whatever openings they're having and the evolution of themselves are having in therapy, but then a lot of times they want to go share it with someone like, oh my gosh, I just had this revelation. But if they don't have that kind of support, what do they do?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of journaling. I think that journaling is always a safe space to be able to communicate those things and also seeking out those communities without saying too much because of confidentiality. I've had a client who, at some point in her life, realized I'm the only one in therapy. I'm the only one in my family who's ever been to therapy. Let me go online and see if there's a community of people that look like me who've been to therapy. And she found a whole community, a social community, and she started spending time with that community. And so sometimes we have to seek for the community in which we don't see around us. And then I'm also a firm believer in that whatever we're wanting, whatever we're desiring that we don't see within us or we don't have access to, as we began to take that walk, as we began to go on that journey, those things that we were desiring and needing, they will be presented to us. They will begin to show up. And part of that is because now that is the energy that we're putting out into the world. And the other part of that too, again, back to what I shared earlier in this episode, it's the access. I now have access to things that I didn't have access to before. And sometimes that access is to parts of me that I didn't have access to before. And now that I have access to those parts of me, how do I leverage that? How do I now use these beautifully accessible parts of me to go and to get my needs met? So that is something to consider. And part of that too is trusting the process, which I know can be a little scary. And there's also the reality that more than likely you are judging yourself based on the tools you have in your toolbox now to think that I can't do it or it's going to be scary or that I don't have it in me. But the reality is that a great therapist, they're going to provide you tools and walk you through the process so that you are gaining those tools as you're entering into these new levels and opening these new doors. One analogy that I share with clients when they call me and we have a consultation, I said, when it comes to trauma work, we don't know what's going to come out of that box. I call it a trauma box. Clients can say, this happened to me, and I can say, okay, I've seen similar stories like this, but again, everyone's story is unique. So we don't know everything that's going to pop out of there. And so I tell them, think about it like this. If I were your skydiving instructor, I would not just take you up into an airplane and say, all right, you got your parachute on and jump. Before we even get into a parachute, before we even get on the airplane to go up high to skydive, I'm going to talk to you about safety. I'm going to show you how to work your parachute. I'm going to show you what to do if that parachute does not open the first time. What's your backup string to open up the backup parachute? And so we prepare you, a great therapist, because not all therapists operate the same. We prepare you before we even start going down that journey because the reality is that you may not have any tools, but that's okay. A great therapist is going to meet you where you are so that you feel prepared to go down that journey and to open up those boxes.
I already feel like such a warm blanket with the way you're talking about it and this comfort. And I think that sometimes when people haven't ever had that kind of comfort of that safety, experiencing therapy can be very jolting. It can be very daunting. It's almost this feeling of I never knew what I wasn't receiving. I didn't understand what I wasn't able to have. And when they get it, they break down because even if they haven't even touched the deeper stuff, but just recognizing that I can I have value, I have worthiness, I matter. And
Yes.
those things, especially coming from communities where and beyond just the ethnic communities, right? Like even if we talk cultural, you're from the South and it's Southern hospitality. There's the Southern culture, right? There is a lot of overlap. People don't realize it, but Southern culture has a lot of overlap with a lot of collectivist cultural thinking. And there's always that you put someone else first. Their passive conversation and communication is the way you do it because it's gentle. It's not assertive, is looked on as aggressive. And all of these things that you're processing, there's also that recognition of how much weight you've been carrying and that safety that you're bringing in. And again, I want to touch on the fact that even prior to Western therapeutic models, modern psychology, right? We had shamans, we have pastors, priests, pundits. Every religion has that person that they can go to. Beyond that, if you go to small villages, they always have the wise elderly that you go to for advice. And so this concept and idea of having someone to go to and talk to isn't new. It's just what's that format that's going to work for you and recognizing that even though we have the wise elderly and they may not be trained in the things that we know now, but they just have life experience on their side.
Yeah, yeah. They have life experience and they also have the wisdom to listen to what is beyond them or outside of them, whether that's energy, whether that's spirit, whether that's divine, whether that's God, like whatever that language is for them or that spiritual connection is for them, which I think is really important, which goes back to what you're saying and what we've talked about earlier, the value in finding the right therapist for you. Because there are some therapists that are just going to be strictly, this is what the book said, this is what the book told me to do, I'm going to nod my head. But therapy can go beyond that. Therapy can truly be a gift of healing. And I mean, clearly everyone gets into the field for different reasons. One of the things that my trainer told me at EMDR, which I thought was so beautiful, she said, learn the rules so you can see where to break them. And so, what that said for me is that there's so much room and so much permission in EMDR and in all the other ways that I am a therapist or a wellness practitioner to be able to, yes, operate within the rules, but to also push the boundaries to show up as my full self and to give space and permission for clients to show up as their full self. And so, you want a therapist that's, yes, just, they're going to be ethical. Yes, they're going to be legal. Yes, they're going to follow some rules, but they're also, again, going to meet you where you are, because that is where like the magic happens. That's where the shift happens. And not someone just says, okay, the recipe book says 1 pinch of salt, 1 pinch of sugar. No, you want the chef that's going to taste it and be like, oh no, we need more than a pinch. Oh no, we need
Right.
more than a cup. Someone who's going to know that like I have
Because
permission
that's
to
not life.
operate outside. It's not life
That's
at
not
all.
life. Life is not a instruction manual. It is
No, we don't have
everything but
one.
that.
Right. And I'm a mom of three, and baby, these children did not come with an instruction manual. And parenting is a huge industry. There's so many schools of thoughts on parenting, but even with all those schools of thoughts, like there's still no instruction manual because we're all different.
Yeah. Really, really love that. And so, what would you say if there is one action that a person can take that is reluctant or that is relatively new to this, and they are now hearing that, oh, wait, talk therapy isn't the only thing? Then, how do they even go to understanding the different modalities and what would work for them? And what's that first action they can take?
Yeah, great question. The first action that comes to mind for me is to give yourself permission to be open, to also be honest with yourself that, and asking this question, what I've been currently doing, is it really working for me? You may be surviving, but are you thriving? You may be getting by, but is that the life that you want to live? Is that the life that you want to remember? So I think it's important to start there. I think also that be okay and be open to research. Just like you may research your medical doctor, you may research a company you want to work with, you may research your dentist. Be okay and open to do some research. Looking for a therapist, we're not expecting you to know all of the lingo. That is our job, to go to school, learn the lingo, and to break it down for you in a way that you understand. So we're not expecting you to learn all the lingo, but maybe you know enough to know, I'm okay with a therapist just sitting and listening. I don't want them to talk. Maybe you know enough to know, no, I want feedback. Maybe you know enough to know, I want something other than talk therapy because I want to really get connected with my body. And so knowing yourself or a little bit about yourself is important. And then I think also it's okay to treat therapy the way that we treat any other referral. If we're looking for a mechanic, a hairstylist, someone to build a website, we may ask our circle of friends, we may ask our circle of business connections, hey, I'm thinking about getting to therapy. Do you have any referrals? That's okay to ask that too, just the same as we would for a hairstylist or for a mechanic, and being open to that. That now people are having more conversations about this, and to know that any shame that you have about your story, about your journey, or about mental health, that shame is there for purpose, and it is to keep you in the dark. And this is your invitation to come out of that dark and to begin to walk towards the light of your healing and the lightness of life that it could be if you decide to sit with someone and to really process all of the things that need to be processed in your life.
Oh, oh my gosh, Melissa, so much beautiful wisdom and all of that. And just again, my soul just feels so like safe and connected right now just by you talking. And I want to add to that of it's also okay to graduate from one to the next, right? There's this idea that, and I know I've experienced it, like gone to talk therapy, done somatic, done Reiki, done all different kinds of things. And it's okay that you can start with one, go through that journey, and if it's resonating, great. But there might be a season that that may not resonate anymore, and you have gotten what you needed out of it. And now you want to go deeper or you want to explore in a different way because talk therapy helps you understand where some of these things are coming up from. And I think EMDR helps you then release a lot of these things. And both can play into the same ways, but it's okay to graduate from one to the next.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's okay also to say to your therapist, we've been doing EMDR. Today I want to just talk. That's
Yeah.
okay too. Therapy can be a safe place where you get to practice advocating for yourself. And a great therapist is going to hear that advocation or that feedback and praise you and encourage it and help you to continue to feel safe. If they don't, then that is a yellow flag or orange flag or red flag to say like maybe this isn't a good fit for me, or even to say I said something to you and I feel like it was dismissed, and to be able to process that. Therapy is a safe space to be able to process that too. And to your point, Pyle, that yes, it's okay to transition out or to try something different. It's also okay to outgrow your therapist. Sometimes you've outgrown the tools that your therapists have and you need something different. That doesn't make the therapist bad. That doesn't make you bad. It just means that your time there is done and you've graduated, like you said, Pyle, which is so beautifully stated.
So, the final question I have for you is if there was one way that you could reframe the perspective for listeners on mental health and stigma around mental health, what would that be?
I'm going to have to quote a colleague of mine. Her name is Dr. Glenna Anderson. And she says something which I share in other interviews, which I, because it's so beautifully stated. And her stance is address your mental health before it becomes mental illness. And I think that is just the most beautiful way to put it, that mental health is just the same as your medical health. You go see your dentist maybe every 6 months. You go see your primary care practitioner maybe once a year. You're being proactive about your medical health. And so, what can you do to be proactive about your mental health? Going to see a therapist before you're in crisis is a way to be proactive, is a way to address your mental health so that it does not become mental illness. And if you have mental illness, then you definitely want a safe space to be able to manage whatever those symptoms are.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that so much. Take care of your mental health before it becomes a mental illness, before
Yes,
it grows and compounds, and now it just becomes too overwhelming and mistakes have been made that could have been prevented. I love that so much.
absolutely.
Melissa, thank you so much for joining today and for sharing all of these different beautiful ways of how you've expanded your own practice and how you share with your clients across whether it's in your clinical practice or outside of your clinical practice. And but how can people connect with you? How can they learn from you even if outside of the capacity of clients?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Pyle. This has been a beautiful session, a beautiful meeting of the minds, and I really hope that it resonates and it meets those that it needs to meet. You can find me, I try to make it easy, my first and last name, Melissa, Dumaz, Dumaz. That is my website, melissadumaz.com. That is all of my social media handles, Melissa Dumas. I also have a podcast called the Hats Podcast, where we help ambitious women to be able to manage and to find harmony in all of the different hats that they wear. So it's real stories with personal tips on how to manage those hats. I also have a book called The Love Challenge that can be found anywhere that you purchase books. But I would love to stay connected, would love to stay in touch for any tips, any wisdom, or any ways that we can be connected and work together. So thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, so much. I really hope that you enjoy this episode. And I just have one favor to ask you. If you could just make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a rating and review, it's going to help us tremendously to make sure that we reach as many people as possible that you think should be listening to our episodes. I'll see you next week for another episode, and thank you so much for leaving that one review, that one subscription, and sharing this with your friends.